Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. On Wednesday on my live stream, I did the Upanisa Sutta, the Transcendental Dependent Origination. And today I'm going to expand on that theme a bit by focusing in on the last stages of the Upanisa Sutta, a sequence that occurs elsewhere in the scriptures as well. When the Buddha is talking about the mind in the last stages reaching the unconditioned, experiencing Nibbana, breaking through, one of the common formulas that is given for that is the sequence Yata Bhuta Nanadasana, then Nibbida, Viraga, Nirodha, Vimutti. Yata Bhuta Nanadasana means knowledge and vision of things as they are. This is almost a synonym for vipassana, which means clear seeing, a term that is extremely rare in the canon. It's a commentarial period term. We talk of vipassana meditation, and that's a useful kind of characterization, but it's slightly misleading in that vipassana per se is not a technique of meditation, but is a state of mind. And the techniques of meditation are methods for accessing that state of mind, which is a way of seeing. You know? Knowledge and vision of things as they are means seeing according to reality and not otherwise. So this is the nature of vipassana is just this, seeing things in their own nature, taking them as they are, not as we would wish them to be, or as we imagine them to be, or as we construct them to be. The mind that is following this way of seeing takes each arising occurrence, each Dhamma, simply in its own nature as it is. And this is quite different than the way the mind ordinarily perceives things, when the mind of the worldly person just going about their day, things are not perceived in their own nature. They're perceived according to a coloration of desire or fear. Things are distorted by attachment and aversion. There's a tendency to magnify the importance of some objects and to disregard other objects. As the mind that's carrying on in the way of vipassana, seeing things in their true nature as they actually are, makes no discrimination between objects. Each object is seen just in its own nature as it actually is. This is the road to wisdom. Panya, wisdom or understanding, is the knowing of things in their own nature as they are. A very important part of this clear seeing is the development of equanimity. That is the equal attention paid to every object and not allowing the objects to seize hold of the mind. Now, when this happens in ordinary course of the mind, many objects are disregarded. They're not even paid heed to at all. And other objects become the focus of either desire, fascination, excitement, interest, or oppositely of fear, hatred, aversion, anxiety. And these emotional reactions to the object are excluded by the presence of equanimity. The mind is just calm, centered, peaceful, and whatever arises is just seen in its own nature as it is. There are two sides or aspects of wisdom. There's the discriminating wisdom and there's the wisdom of equality. And both are important. The discriminating wisdom makes distinctions between objects. So this is a sense impression, this is a thought, this is a memory. And you're clear about the distinctions between objects. And one that the Buddha particularly mentions is distinguishing between thought forms that are kusala and those that are akusala, those that are skillful and those that are unskillful. So the objects are discriminated, and this is part of seeing them in their own nature. But the other side of this is the wisdom of equality, or the equalizing wisdom, which is seeing what the objects have in common, which is principally the three characteristics. Seeing that an object is impermanent, it has no persistence, technically it has no duration, it's transient, and at a coarser level we see that things, constructed things, which is mostly what we're able to notice, are always in a state of change and flux. This is the characteristic of dukkha, suffering or unsatisfactoriness or imperfection. These are all aspects of dukkha. It's the essence of things that they're incomplete, imperfect, broken. And this is an unavoidable characteristic of just being in existence, of being manifest. The great emptiness, the sunyata, could be thought of as because it's void of any form or particularity, it's a universal potential. It's all possibilities, all potentials. But as soon as something becomes manifest, comes into existence, then it no longer has a universal potential. It has just this fragmentary existence. And this is dukkha. And this is perceived at the coarser level as either suffering, outright suffering, or as the unsatisfying nature of the objects, or as the imperfect nature of the objects. So nothing in existence can satisfy the mind. This is part of the dynamic of becoming, because we're always seeking perfection and completion. And it keeps the mind active and busy and grasping after the next thing. But because of the inherent nature of the objects, they are unable to fully satisfy that craving. So they leaves the dynamic operating. And finally, the third characteristic is emptiness, or anatta or sunya. Nothing exists from its own side. Nothing has a self-essence. Everything is simply a result of cause and condition combination of other things. There are no self-existent standalone entities anywhere. So these three characteristics, anicca, dukkha, anatta, are universal. And within the bounds of samsara, all sankharas have these characteristics. So the mind seeing things as they actually are, yatibhuta nanadasana, becomes more and more aware of these three characteristics. And when this knowledge and vision, this way of seeing and understanding, deepens and matures and becomes more automatic, more internalized, more immediate, the mind moves naturally into a feeling of nibbida. This is one of the most problematic words in Pali to try and translate. Some of the older translations used revulsion, which I think is too strong and has a wrong connotation. More common these days is to see it translated as disenchantment, which is better, I think, but maybe a bit too vague in a way. Nibbida is what happens with the mind when it has seen the nature of samsara, but not yet seen beyond it. So there's a sense of weariness in the mind with samsara, a sense of not wanting it. At this stage, it can be still felt as some degree of aversion. In the commentary to the Upanisa Sutta, the commentator relates this phase of nibbida directly with the phases in another list, the list of the stages of insight, which is a series, I think it's 24 stages. It's a long, expansive list. It has its origins in the Relay Coach Sutta, which is pretty much just a list of names. That the stages are not elaborated there, but it became quite a literature later, beginning with the commentary, and the Visuddhimagga is actually a very large book. Is actually structured entirely around that. The whole, like the chapter headings have to do with the stages, from the stages of insight. And the most accessible modern version is Mahasi Sayadaw's Progressive Insight. Now, in that list, the stages of insight, after the mind begins really doing vipassana, which occurs at the stage called discernment of what is path and what is not path. It's said that the mind is only really doing vipassana after that. Then, after progressing through various combinations, the mind comes to the point where it has seen the true nature of samsara, but not yet seen beyond it. So this can be a kind of overwhelming realization. It can be experienced with fear, despair, and these are the names of stages that are listed in the progressive insight. Knowledge of dissolution, knowledge of fear, knowledge of despair. In some other spiritual traditions, they have a parallel idea. In Christian mysticism, they talk about the dark night of the soul. So this can be a difficult passage. That nibbida is not really a pleasant experience, but it has to be faced with courage and resolution. There's a saying, the way out is down and through. You have to slay the dragon under the bridge. Huh? And you see the nature of samsara, and it's like the rose-colored glasses have come off. Here's reality as it actually is. This body is unreliable, it's aging, it's prone to illness, it's falling apart even as I sit here. The mind is no better, it's ephemeral, it's falling this way and that, it's confused. There's nothing to rely on, nowhere to take a stand. And it's possible at this stage that the meditator will become either frightened or despairing and will not have the resolution or the courage to go forward, but will retreat. In which case that doesn't resolve anything, and this can be a very prolonged process of, 2 steps forward or 1 step back. The best advice is to just keep going. Just courageously face the reality manifesting at this point. Because there is an end to it. One is no longer then able to rely on samsara, which previously had been seen as a false refuge. The mind emerges from nibbida into a stage called viraga, dispassion. It's when samsara has been seen through, then the craving or passion or desire for samsaric objects and samsaric becoming diminishes and weakens and attenuates, fades away. It's like the driving energy of the wheel of becoming is dissipated. It's running out of fuel. You stop throwing coal into the engine, and it gradually cools. And this experience of viraga allows the mind to begin to loosen its tether to samsara, to becoming, to samsaric existence. It's no longer so tightly bound. It's becoming loosely attached. In the stages of insight, this has a parallel with the stage of equanimity about formations, which after the difficult passage, the mind comes to rest here, and it is in itself a pleasant abiding, and it's refreshing and easy, peaceful on the mind. There's no sense of struggle. There's no sense even of effort. There's no sense of making an effort to meditate. The meditator just sits there completely at ease and present and is aware of the objects passing through the screen of consciousness. And everything is seen with equal attention. And nothing affects the mind strongly towards either attachment or aversion. Although these may occur in very mild forms, they don't disturb the mind or move the mind from the center. And this can be called the jumping off place. It's not yet enlightenment or awakening, but it's the place where that can happen. And there's nothing more to do. This is as far as you can get by way of effort. And what becomes possible at that stage is that attachment of the mind to the next object becomes so tenuous that at some point it just stops doing that. And this is vimutti, liberation, the emergence or breaking away from that process of mind taking an object, being dissatisfied, taking the next object. The mind just stops doing that. And the nibbana, or the unconditioned, is experienced at that point. And one way of understanding that is that's what happens when the mind just stops doing samsara. When you just stop doing that, then the only other alternative for the mind is from the conditioned is the unconditioned. So those are a description of the final stages of the mind emerging into the unconditioned. And the qualities that need to be developed to get to these stages are, first of all, equanimity and wakefulness, attention, and determination.